Thank you for that, Ronald. Attacks on journalists, rogue news and misinformation. These are all things that the new press ombudsman will have to deal with, and will get worse in the lead up to South Africa's most anticipated elections. If anyone can keep us all in the straight and narrow, I suspect Pippa Green is the right person for the job. Welcome, my guest, Pippa Green. You're starting at an interesting time ahead of the elections. What are your expectations and what's your mission?
Good evening, Jane. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Well, I don't know so much if I have a mission, except the mission that exists is very simple. And it is particularly, as you say, because it's just before the elections. But it's really to keep the press the media as free as possible, but also to make sure that it's as ethical and as correct as possible. Obviously, journalists make mistakes in the course of their work, and often they're bona fide errors. But in order to be free, the self-regulating body of the Press Council tries to ensure that there is a code of ethics that is subscribed to by the media that belong to the Press Council. So that's basically the Ombudsman's job. It's not so much as to restrict, but to protect the terrain of freedom, but to develop the professionalism and ethics of the media as well.
And I guess it's increasingly hard ahead of elections because journalists are put under a certain amount of pressure by parties, so you've got to try and work out what's real and what's not. At the same time, we're seeing, an increase in fake news. We're also seeing political parties, EFF in particular, targeting journalists with hate speech. How do you deal with all of that?
Well, we are not. What we can do is to at least govern the print industry to make sure that some of those allegations and some of the practices are not repeated if they're wrong. As far as politicians are concerned, targeting journalists, and in the latest case, the case of Karima Brana, a talk show host, I do think that it's the duty of the Press Council and the Ombudsman to speak out against any kind of threats against the media. Those things are also covered by the law. There's a law of privacy against putting somebody's cell phone number in a relatively public space like Twitter. So there are many, and there's obviously a law against threats of criminal threats. And really, in some cases, one wonders why the law is not enforced, because...
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. I mean, it seems that the law really is taking a back seat here, taking too long to respond.
Yes, I completely agree. And this hasn't been the only case. There was a case of, a picture of Floyd Shivambu actually, physically attacking a journalist in the parliamentary precinct. And again, I think that journalist has laid charges, but nothing seems to have happened. So one wonders why the law is so slow, and that is really the purview of the law rather than the Ombudsman and the Press Council. But I do think that as part of the architecture that protects the media and protects the space of the media, it's really important that we all speak out against those kind of intrusions and against the kind of the common law transgressions that there have been.
And how do you see South African media in the international landscape? I mean, how are we doing? And what sort of pressures do belt tightening, lack of money put us under?
I think that we've done well in some instances and not so well in others. I think that the recent, over the past year, 2 years, the investigative journalism that's come out with certainly looking at the Gupta leaks, the kind of work that Jacques Poe has done investigating the intelligence services, all of those have been pointers to far more substantial statutory bodies, actually, or certain things like the Commission of Inquiry, the Zondo Commission that's up now. The President's the report on the intelligence services that's just been released. A lot of those issues, of those bodies, were prefaced by good journalism. So that's the strong, those are the strong instances. I think where we're weak is that we are an industry that's in financial trouble. So journalists are very pressed, they're very hurried, they don't have time always to reflect really the breadth and depth of stories of the country. And I sometimes get the idea that what we listen to when we listen to each other is a fairly small slice of urban life, and we don't really go further because we are such an unequal society. And a lot of the poorest people are located in rural areas. I'm concerned that we're not hearing enough about the poorest of the poor, enough about how our whole society is kind of glued together, that we talk on social media and in the electronic media and the print media amongst a relatively small group of predominantly urban-based people. And I wish the media would be able to get out and reflect the story of the country in broader terms.
I suppose that can only help public trust in the media then too. I know that that's part of your remit.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I think that and I think that's why the preserving and really protecting the ethics of the profession is so important. So that if you have a story, as there was 3 years ago, I think 3.5 years ago, on the rogue unit, the so-called rogue unit in SARS, that it's really important that that the transgressions there were kind of called. And they were by the present incumbent, I only start in April, Johan Retief, who did a judgment on, and basically just on the basic principles of journalism, verification, the right to reply, whether a document was trustworthy or not, made a very strong finding against the Sunday Times for using that story. Because the freedom of the media, I think, depends very essentially on its credibility. And the trust between the public and the media depends essentially on its credibility. And that depends on professionalism, on ethics, and on doing the legwork, doing the legwork to make sure that your story is correct and that you're not fed information by sources that you're not sure of whose agenda that you're driving.
Pippa Green, very good to talk to you. Well done on getting the job. Thank you. A locally developed waterless urinal system that produces fertilizer and biobricks is garnering international attention. A University of Cape Town academic has now become the first African recipient of a Global Chemical Engineers Award. Now, the man and his postgraduate students have pioneered 2 world firsts in sustainable resource recovery systems. Our reporter, Stefan Goosen, finds out more.
Dr. Dylan Randall is the brain behind this project.
We developed this in 2017 as a result of the drought we were experiencing in Cape Town. And the way it works is essentially you add a chemical to the empty container, and then the user would come along and pee into the container, and almost immediately you start producing a fertilizer.
What's more, the liquid component is also upcycled into a biobrick making process.
Essentially you have a mold in the shape of a biobrick. And what you do is you add sand, and we added an aggregate to increase the strength. And then we add special bacteria to this mold and the mixture. They break down the chemicals in the urine, and they basically produce almost like a biocement. And what that does is it starts gluing the loose sand particles together, and eventually you have a solid in the shape of a biobrick.
Randall was recently announced as the recipient of the prestigious Institution of Chemical Engineers Warner Prize.
It means that we're doing something really relevant, and I have to commend the team because it's a team effort.
Randall is hoping for more funding. He says it will take about 2 years before communities around the country can begin reaping the rewards of this project. Stefan Goosen, Cape Town.
The Johannesburg Zoo has a few more additions to the family. As part of its 115th birthday celebrations, the zoo's welcomed 4 tiger cubs, a puma cub, and a giraffe calf to its clan. Tekote Moahi has more.
The Joburg Zoo family is growing.
I imagine the same situation though. Yeah.
But the puma and tiger cubs aren't the only newbies. The zoos also welcomed a not-so-little giraffe calf. All this is part of the park's 115th anniversary.
There is more life for the animals at the zoo. They are our priority. Hence, we have a veterinary a hospital where we are ensuring that the animals are checked all the time and their health is taken care of. There's also life in terms of educating children. You see all around you today there are a number of children from different ECD centers, from different schools who are also here. So the educational component of the zoo also plays a major role.
The world's Siberian tiger population is dwindling fast, so preserving them for future generations is an important component for the zoo.
What we're intending to do is we're going to keep 2 of the cubs because all 4 of them are females. So we can only keep so much because looking at the cost-wise and the space, we can only keep 2 females and look for a genetically unrelated male to continue the breeding of tigers because there's only quite few of them left in the wild. And the other 2, we will be sending them out to other conservation facilities.
For now, the cubs can enjoy playing and basking in the sun. Johannesburg.
That's our show for tonight. News is next. See you there.